Hello and welcome to our second installment of our virtual roundtable series by GlocalNet. If you missed our first one, you missed a really good one. It was with Daniel Yang from the Send Institute talking about Asian American discrimination and what faith leaders can do about it. No worries if you missed it though. You can go to our website glocal.net and find the video there and share it from there as well. But today, we'll be premiering a discussion with Bob Roberts Jr. and Nick Burleson on preparing church for a post-quarantine world. It's been very strange and surreal having an empty building for the last several weeks, but restrictions are starting to light up. So what do you do? How do you become prepared? These guys have amazing insights and tips on how to do that today. Please feel free to engage live during the premiere. Bob and Nick will be answering your questions and commenting along with you, so please feel free to engage with us there. We also have a ton of more resources with a ton of great guests coming up, so please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow these amazing resources that we're preparing for you. Thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, here's Bob and Nick.
Hi, I'm Bob Roberts. I'm your host today at the virtual roundtable for GlocalNet, and I'm excited to have you back. We did our first program last week. We had hundreds of people come to it. We were excited, and we expect the same this week. We have an incredible GlocalNet leader, part of the family. He works training church planters. He's been with me to Vietnam. He does a tremendous amount of inner city work. His name is Nick Burleson. Nick, we are so glad to have you today.
Glad to be here, Bob. Honored to be here with you.
Where's your wife?
She's at home. She's working on timber ridge stuff today.
Nikki loves her. Nikki says, Bob, that woman can preach.
You can.
She said, you know, Bob, don't tell Nick this, but I like listening to her sometimes even more than Nick.
You can tell Nikki I get that a lot, actually.
But you know what? You got a good self-image that you have a gifted wife and you turn her loose. A lot of guys are afraid to turn their wives loose.
That's true.
I mean, there's some guys watching right now, their names, I could call them out. I won't, I'll just look and point. But so Nick, how long have you been at your church?
We started Timber Ridge 8 years ago. It'll be 9 years ago at the end of this year.
And what did you focus on when you went there?
Right off the bat, we focused on engaging the city, community engagement, and then focusing on reaching college students and young families. College students were a big part of what we've done since day one.
Now, your church is one of the premier churches in America for reaching college students. I mean, you've got to be taking a hit with everything that's going on right now.
It's really like summer right now for us, which is weird. Our church is about 50% of the people that call Timber Ridge Church home now live in other cities. Because the college campus is shut down. And so they've all moved home for the most part. And so it's brought in a completely different dynamic to us.
So in the age of COVID-19, churches going online, do you still have, are many of the college students and the other people, are they following with you? How's it going, Nick?
It's going good. Our college students have stayed with us, engaging digitally. We have life groups, small groups that are meeting. We're engaging via social media platforms. And so that is one thing we worried about with the COVID-19 crisis, but our college students have stayed connected. And part of that, I think, is digitally. It's just something that's natural for them.
Especially for that generation. Let me ask you this. I've heard of some churches are actually seeing an uptick in attendance and in the sense of people following online. And I know it's difficult to measure the amount of people that are really hanging in there with you for your services, but are you seeing that, or is it staying the same, or is it dipped being a college campus?
This has caused us, we did not do a lot of stuff online. And this has caused us to put a lot of focus online. And so for us, it's been an uptick. Here's what I will say has been interesting. The reason it's been an uptick in engagement is because we've been going for 8 years now. Well, that's 8 senior classes from Tarleton that have graduated and moved on. Yeah. So they're able to join back into the church that many of them came to faith in, were baptized in, learned how to follow Jesus initially in. So they're able to come home, so to speak, and join us again, and they love it. And so that's been huge for us engagement-wise.
How many churches has your church started out of it, Nick?
Right, as of right now, 32.
That's awesome. You're the point person along with Kevin Cox for training church planters at GlocalNet now. Uh, this has got to be a challenging time for new churches, and we're going to have Kevin Cox come on in a edition in the not too distant future, and he's going to talk about church planting in the age of COVID and what that looks like. But let me ask you this, Nick. I mean, your church has grown. It's a very large church. It's an influential church. Talk to us. I mean, what does it mean moving forward? Governor Abbott came out yesterday with a lot of requirements. And there's three dimensions I want us to look at. But the first is, what are the practical applications you would say to us? Okay, you're going to go and you're going to open up again. What should we expect? How should we prepare? How do we get ready, Nick?
I think that's a great question, Pastor Bob. I think, if you look at the guidelines, President Trump on whitehouse.gov, opening America, he gave 3 phases. The first phase, I've got some of the phases printed out here. Strongly urges face mask in public, no groups greater than 10, maximize social distance. And then that's if the curve has been downward in your state or your region for 14 days, you can begin there, and then it's another 14 days. If it continues to go downward, phase 2 is gatherings of less than 50 are encouraged. So avoid gatherings over 50, social distance protocol still in place, and wear face mask in public. Another 2 weeks of downward trends, and you have phase 3, which is limited social distancing protocols in places of gatherings like places of worship, and minimize time spent in environments with crowds. All of those impact churches. If you take Texas, the thing that came out in Texas yesterday, all the headlines said Texas governors open churches for gathering. But if you read it, there's so many recommendations that are in place. The first recommendation is houses of worship should conduct services remotely when at all possible. Encouraging 65 and older to stay home, or encouraging your church to offer a senior-only service for 65 and above. Attendees with underlying health issues are encouraged to stay at home. Ushers and greeters are asked to wear masks. Childcare areas need to be remained closed unless they can comply with the CDC Child Care Center standards. You're supposed to ask your members to put on masks and sanitize before they enter the building. Only sit with a family unit, and there has to be strict social distancing between family units wherever they sit. The clergy are asked to dismiss the services one family at a time to maintain social distancing. Sanitize between services, refrain from passing offering plates, have a collection centrally located that people don't touch, and perform the sacraments without having people touch the same surfaces. And so if you think about that, we're all going to wear masks. We can't touch, we can't hug, we got to hand sanitize, stay 12 feet away from me, but let's come back together. So, there are going to be a lot of people who say, I don't know about that. I think I'm going to stay at home for a while.
So what are you going to do, Nick? When can we start doing that? This Sunday?
So, it's up to your region or state, and this is allowed this Sunday. He's going to make another announcement here in Texas on the 27th. Georgia has opened back up effective yesterday. I think for us, we're going to open up in a phase because the president has said phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and he's given people guidelines to that. We can easily say, hey, phase 1 for a couple weeks, we're going to keep going online because our president has said 10 or less. Once we get to phase 2, 50 or less, that's another issue. And then phase 3 is groups of 200 to 250 or less. So we're going to open up in a phased system like that. But I think
can somebody have a worship service this Sunday if they wanted to, Nick?
They can have a worship service if they want
But
to.
how many can come to it? Like if you social distance, could you have a couple of hundred, or is it only 50, or is it only 10? Like what if you have a 2,000 seat auditorium and you had 300 people or 400 people come to that service? Can you help us, or is it vague?
It's very vague. So over the national guidelines, the federal guidelines would say we haven't been 14 days yet, so 10 or less. However, some state governors are saying, hey, you can go ahead and meet, just keep your social distancing guidelines, your 6 to 12 feet, whatever it is, 6 to 10 feet between people. That's going to limit it. Some states are saying 50, some states are saying 250, some states aren't putting a numeric limit on.
All we care about is Texas, Nick.
Texas,
that's their problem.
But I would encourage you.
What's the Texas rule?
The Texas rule is those things I just went over: wearing face mask, social distancing. There's not a limit on it. Social distancing. And so
doing your services online, I'm going to guess.
Yes, we will, because the first part of Governor Abbott's recommendation is houses of worship should conduct services remotely when at all possible. And so we're going to continue for the time being. I think there's some things too, Bob, when it comes to practically opening up that church planners and pastors need to be thinking through about their facilities, their ministries, all of those things.
So talk about some of those. I mean, you just mentioned, according to CDC standards, I don't have a clue what CDC standards are. I mean, I would think your kids area, I mean, one of the big things to grow a church and reach people, have a great kids ministry, keep it clean. And boy, this is going to be a paranoid type time.
It is. Kids ministries can open up if they can comply with CDC guidelines, which right now, if you look on the CDC page, that's no more than 10 kids per room, temperature checked upon arrival, and no signs of sickness.
Wow. So you could have a huge kids ministry area,
and 10
but
kids.
If you've only got 4 rooms, you're looking at 40 kids.
For sure.
Wow.
And what I've seen with talking with most pastors is most churches are going to come back without kids ministries. Yeah. But the ones who are thinking about kids ministry, I think here's what church planners need to think through. Do you have a cleaning plan and training for your cleaning team in place? What kind of things do you have in place for when kids arrive? Not only like check-in, how can you do contactless check-in of kids? How can you take kids?
How do you do that, Nick?
You
contactless check-in.
Well, if you're doing online check-in, if you're using a system for check-in, you're going to have to go to a paper form or of some kind,
like an iPhone maybe, or
an iPhone, name tags that parents fill out. That will be something that teams have to figure out and work out. The cleaning plan is going to be huge, I believe. Not just that you have a cleaning plan for your building and for your kids ministry, but the communication of the cleaning plan now becomes more important than you communicating what your new sermon series is.
Wow.
I was reading an article on the Wall Street Journal about different companies and how they've been financially impacted, and it spotlighted American Airlines. And American Airlines did a survey of its returning customers, and they're doing all these things to serve their customers, extending statuses and extending miles that have been accumulated. But the number one thing that the customers wanted was to know that the planes had been cleaned. Yeah. Now, American Airlines claims that they have the top cleaning of any airline, but even though they were doing it, they did not communicate that they were doing that to their customers. And that was the customer's number one thing. Parents aren't going to want to know what the kids' theme is.
But Nick, I would think that would be big. So let's say a church is not going to do kids ministry at first, but they're going to gradually open up. I think that would be big for the restrooms.
Communication is key.
I mean, I almost wonder if you don't need someone in there the whole time.
Yes.
Making sure versus, okay, we'll go check them between services. I mean, that's what a lot of churches do, but
not just restrooms. So we're planning to have restroom attendants. We're also planning to have door attendants at every door that needs to be opened. So not only the outside door greeters, but inside going into the worship center, so that multiple people aren't touching those doors, and only volunteers who've washed their hands, sanitized their hands, and put gloves on and are no longer touching their face. They have a mask, they have gloves, they're opening doors. So think through kids facilities, think through your worship center, think through restrooms. If you have a cafe or some kind of food
Oh,
service,
wow. Yeah.
that's huge implications. We won't be offering a cafe initially coming back. That's been a huge part of our hospitality. But if you think through, Bob, hospitality, which is huge for churches, that's the foundation of our church is hospitality. Hospitality used to be donuts, coffee, hugs, and handshakes.
Yeah.
And now hospitality will be proving to you that I've taken your best health interest in mind.
Wow.
Now hospitality is wearing a face mask instead of offering a hug.
I
And
wonder
we
if
really have to think through that.
I wonder if your first sermon you ought to walk out there in a hazmat suit.
I've thought about it, but I don't want to freak people out.
Talk to me, Nick, about not just the implication of the facilities and the ministries and so forth. Talk to us a little bit about engagement. I mean, you guys are known for
Sure.
serving your city in an incredible way. I mean, how does this impact that?
I think it impacts engagement in a couple ways. Number one of the ways churches would say they engage, I would argue with this engagement term, is what they communicate that the church is doing to the city. I think it goes along like, when we're offering services, when we're cleaning, what we're doing, we need to communicate that to our city. If we want our people to feel safe in our facilities, we've got to communicate those things. But I think from an engagement standpoint, we have to think through what engagement looks like, because for so many churches and church plants, our engagement is we're having this big event. Come check out this event, or we're having this big outreach, come to this outreach. Well, if you're in an area where they're limiting groups to 250, groups to 50, groups to even less, then what happens is you have to rethink how you do engagement. Now, if you're equipping your people to engage where they work and where they live, you're probably at a way better spot. That's what we do. So our people are equipped to engage our local community through their jobs. And
Talk to us about some of the things you do, Nick.
So we do a lot of different things. We equip college students to engage on the college campus. Obviously, that's changed. We equip our teachers and our education domain workers to engage with the education domain. So we have teachers serving other teachers, teachers serving at the school. We've partnered with the school to do some food pantries locally because of our engagement there. We engage in the health domain, medical domain with doctors and nurses. So we're very engaged with our local medical and surgical clinic because we have members that are there who work and see that as their ministry. So we've been engaging by providing food for them, by providing resources for them. One of the things we've done is engaging with food insecurity. So we're providing food for families. We're giving away pizzas and trying to also have some fun with that engagement, just to bring hope to people. So we do a pizza giveaway. We're doing one on Friday where we're giving away pizza and paper. So we'll give away 200 pizzas and 200 cartons of toilet paper to 200.
Are these new rolls of toilet paper?
Brand new, never been used. So a lot of that engagement, we're engaging with grocery store employees because we have a lot of college students who work in the grocery store. And so we've been able to pray with them. We've been able to take them lunch. Engagement looks different. You've got to think, how can we engage the masses without one specific event to engage the masses? Because even when people come back, even when we're reopened for good, people are going to be skeptical of crowds. So how do we engage domains instead of just a mass?
The number one way people say they still come to faith in Christ is through a one-on-one relationship with someone. So I would think engagement in the workplace, the school, where people live their lives, long-term, that's got to be better for the church anyhow than one single event that they go, ooh, look at what they did. What do you think?
I think, Bob, you're spot on. Here's what I hope the church is realizing. Timber Ridge was fortunate. We learned this from you. We learned this from you in the early days. We learned this from our GlocalNet family. We don't have to meet in buildings to have influence.
That's good.
We don't have to gather at 11 a.m. on Sunday morning in order to have an impact. Well, I think maybe the biggest lesson for the church in all of this is that the church is not a place, the church is not a gathering, the church is not a building, but neither is the church a group of paid vocational professionals. The church is the people of Jesus doing the mission of Jesus. And we're positioned maybe now better than ever to do that.
Hey, let's back up. That was really good. Give us your definition of church again. I really like that.
I said I think the biggest lesson of all is that the church is not a building, a gathering, or a place we go to, but neither is it a group of paid vocational professionals. The church is the people of Jesus living out the mission of Jesus.
There you go. I like that. The people of Jesus doing the mission of Jesus. I like that, Nick.
And nothing can stop that. There's not a regulation or an ordinance or a guideline in place right now that keeps me from loving my neighbor and calling to check and make sure he and his wife are doing okay and seeing if they need anything and how I can pray for them.
You know, Nick, it's interesting that the former plagues throughout history, they were never bad for the church. They were fantastic for the church. It grew exactly because of what you're saying. I mean, the people of Jesus doing the mission of Jesus. I mean, this is a moment, I think, frankly, for the church to shine, for us to jettison a lot of the junk stuff that we've gotten straddled with through history. And wow, what an opportunity to reformat. I mean, that would be so good, Nick.
For sure.
So can you tell me one story, something cool or something funny or something profound that's happened through your engagement over the last month? Some story that, I don't know, when you get discouraged or frustrated, you know the offering is horrible and you're having to preach to an empty room, it just gives you a little bit of fire to keep going.
We've tried to engage our city really well, and the first time we did our pizza giveaway, we had a city council member reach out to our church who's not a part of our church, and he called me the day we were doing it. He found out we did it, and he said, "Hey, can we double the number of pizzas? I'll personally pay for the rest." And we've seen things like that happen over and over again, where a lot of what we're doing to engage our community is being funded or at least helped resourced by people that necessarily don't call Timber Ridge Church their home church. Yeah. But they believe in what we're doing. We had a lady send us a message on Twitter. She said, "I lived in Stephenville for several years. I grew up there. I didn't go to Timber Ridge before I moved. Our church was young then." She said, "But if I ever come back to Stephenville, that's where I'll go because you love our city. And everything you're doing shows your love for our city." And so those things just keep us going.
You know, Nick, one of the things, Kevin Brown, one of the LocalNet family guys, Kevin, just like you, serving his city. And what's interesting, this has happened to you too. When you serve your city and you start out from day one, when there's a crisis, they call you.
That's right.
A lot of churches right now that are trying to figure out what can we do, and they're calling people saying help. But when you've already got that reputation, you are on speed dial. And
I'm busier now than I've ever been.
Yeah, so whether it's testing or Kevin, a food bank is working with him, or your pizza ministry that you've not blessed me with personally, all of these things that come into play. That's awesome. Nick, what would you say to a new church planter? I don't want to go too much into this. I want to say this for Kevin Cox, but there's a lot of guys that are listening right now. They're hurting, and they're listening because you've planted your church, you train planters, they're starting their church. What encouragement about engagement would you say right now to some of those young guys and gals that are getting it started and they're just really, I don't know, they're serving, but they feel like maybe it's not a big deal, but it's the most they can do?
I would say this, a couple things, because my heart is church planters, Bob. You know that. So if you're a church planter, you're watching this. I would say, first of all, the fact that you're planting a church in the midst of a global pandemic did not surprise Jesus one bit. So don't let it rock you. Like, God knew that you would be planting during this time. So don't let it rock you. I would say if you're going through that, don't go through it alone. We would love to help you. I would love to help you. Our GlocalNet team would love to help you. You can reach out to us at GlocalNet on Twitter or on the website. You can email churchplanting@glocal.net. Do not go through this time alone. It's too hard for us to walk through it alone.
I honestly think, Nick, this could be a fantastic, for a real church planter who loves to be creative, wow, what an opportunity to innovate and do
That's
some good R&D.
That's it. I would say just do what you can do. Be creative, engage however you can. Don't worry that if you have to pop up an iPhone to do your weekly services and you can't compete with the mega church down the street, no one cares about production right now. The only people that care about production are church people. It's us that work at the church. Nobody cares about your production. They care about your influence. When the food pantry comes to town, are you serving? What are you using your money for? What little money you may have to engage the community? How are you serving your neighbors? What are you doing for single moms who are out of work? Just plop your iPhone up and do a Bible study and do a sermon, and that's great, but focus on engaging your city.
Let me ask you one last question, then we're going to take some of these questions people are asking,
Okay.
a lot of questions. But Nick, what would you say to pastors, church leaders, faith leaders during this time, spiritually and emotionally? What would you say to them?
That's a great question. I'd say spiritually, we need to be asking ourselves, and again, Bob, I learned this from you. God, what are you teaching me? But also, what are you teaching the church? I think it would be a shame if we went through this and came back and went back to normal. The church in the West is broken and it's sick. And for us not to use this time as a hard reset on our hearts as leaders, but also for the church, the Big C church, would be a shame. And so, God, what do you want to teach me through this? And God, what do you want to teach the church through this? And then I think emotionally, this has probably highlighted now more than ever our need to make sure that we are finding our value, our worth, and our identity in the person of Jesus. That we're spending time with God, not in order to get some catchy phrase for a sermon, but so that we can find sustenance to live. Because we will, in times of crisis, it's heightened. We always just reproduce who we are, but it's heightened in times of crisis. We're only going to pass on what we've been filled with. So
Tell me
as
one
leaders,
thing God is doing in your life right now, Nick, as a result of this. One thing he's teaching you, you know, we come across like, oh, we got all the answers, and we don't. So what would you say one thing, boy, God is really hitting me with this, teaching me this, changing this in my character. Here's something he's really taken me through. Just one thing.
pace, how to rest in Sabbath.
Yeah.
It's been forced. And so I think that's it. Pace and rest and Sabbath. And Sabbath isn't something to preach. Sabbath is something to practice. I think that's been my biggest lesson.
Nick, this has been great. We're going to take some questions. All right. I'm going to
Great.
just read some of these to you. So if you've got some questions, guys, go ahead and type them in. Nick, this is from Stephen J. He said, Nick, you mentioned that you're doing things online more than you ever have before. Are you going to keep the same pace once this is all over and hold services again?
We plan to keep a very vigorous online pace because what we've realized is for the most part, it's simple to do. We're not trying to overproduce things. We're making things pretty simple. A lot of what I'll do devotionally is just jump on a Facebook Live on my phone and talk to our church. So we are going to continue to engage online because we know it's going to be a long process for people to come back in person. We think it will be. And so we want to offer both venues available, in-person things and online. So we'll continue to do things online. I think that's where a lot of engagement will happen in the future.
Okay, here's another question, Nick. How much time do you spend to take making major decisions with news coming as quick as it does? And who do you check with? Do you just make those decisions arbitrarily? Do you have a team that works with you on that? Things happening so fast, how do you respond quick enough?
So we try to stay moving as quick as we can. We stay up to date on all the news. I have a group of pastors You've mentioned some of them: Steve Besner, Kevin Cox, Kevin Brown, that I'm doing life with. I've group text with. We stay connected, so I'm asking them their feedback. That phase 1, 2, 3 that I shared earlier did not come from me. That was Besner's idea in a conversation we had last night. So I'm constantly feeding off those trusted sources. I'm asking my staff opinions, but also leading my team. So I don't want to leave it all up to them, because they may not see things the way that I'm seeing them. And then I also have a group called our pastoral advisory team, basically elders, for lack of a better term, who speak into that as well. But we make decisions quickly, but prayerfully. I don't think you have to have 4 days to pray about a decision to make it. There are some, but not the pace that we're moving now. But here's what I would say along that, Bob. 2 things I think are important for every church planner and pastor watching this. When it comes to reopening specifically, here's what you need to do. You need to use your blinker. That means, like, let people know what you're doing. So this Sunday, even though our governor is not going to be meeting till Monday again, we have a meeting every hour, like on the hour, from 11 a.m. Sunday till 7 p.m. Sunday, meeting with every one of our volunteer teams to walk them through that when we do open, here's, as of now, what the process is, and here's what's going to be expected of you. You can't hug anybody. You got to wear a face mask. You got to clean the kids' room, whatever it may be. But we're using our blinker so our people know where they're going. If they know where we're going, they're more likely to follow us. And the second part of that is being flexible. We're king of this phrase: until further notice, here's the plan. And that's what we're using now. You have to.
I like that. All right, here's another question. Has it impacted you financially? And how do you make the hard decisions about what to cut and sometimes who to cut?
It's definitely impacted us financially. We're a blue-collar college church. So when people start getting laid off, our church is typically the first to go. There are people. So it has impacted us financially. It's hurt our giving significantly. We have had to make difficult decisions. We had an early learning center that we had to shut down. We had to furlough 23 employees. It was a very difficult decision. We're trying to do those with as much wisdom as we can, including people that are smart when it comes to finances and money, but also acting in faith. So there's a lot of prayer involved. Johanna and I co-lead through those decisions together. And so we're praying, we're seeking the Lord. We have financial advisors who are watching what our finances look like, but it has required some difficult decisions. And if it hasn't hit you yet, it probably will at some point, because the financial reality is, people, when we do reopen, people are coming back. Less people have jobs. They have more debt because they put off paying their rent or mortgage because they could, but they still owe it. And they're more likely to want to hide money away. So they want to save more for themselves. Their jobs aren't as good, or they don't have them, and they have more debt. Giving, I think I read the other day, is to nonprofits in the United States is down 42%. So that is going to impact churches in the long haul.
I have been fortunate to be a part of a small group of people with the World Economic Forum, and we have these phone calls. And what they're saying is this is going to be at least an 18-month event, if not 2 years. And it doesn't mean it'll always be this hard, but it's going to be up and down and back and forth. And there will be new normals, just like after 9/11. And so they're saying also to prepare. Now this sounds dire. I just don't know. But they said that you can expect 50% of income to be lost in companies and businesses. Charities, it'll even be worse. So I wouldn't go out and slash things by that tomorrow, but I would start getting my head around it and get ready for various scenarios.
Bob, along those lines, we have already had the conversation with our staff and all the church planners that I coach. I'm encouraging them, if they have staff, to begin to have the conversation of what does it look like for your entire staff to be co-vocational. I think we owe it to our staffs to begin to have that conversation. When our staff started getting in their stimulus checks, a lot of the conversation was around how could I invest this into a business, starting a business that would allow me to do ministry, continuing to do ministry. And those are real conversations that need to happen. I would rather prepare for that and not need it than to spring on our staff hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to have to make you co-vocational. So those are conversations that people need to have as we talk about reopening. What does it look like to have a church staff? What does it look like to be co-vocational? How do we split our hours and time so that we can do what God's called us to do and also provide for our families?
It's great, Nick. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And you can reach out to Nick at GlocalNet. You can go to the website and you can just type in contact in any way that you want to reach out to Nick or any of the rest of us. You can follow Nick on Twitter and Instagram, and I encourage you to do that.
It's at Nick Burleson. No K. NICBURLESON.
I thought it was Nikki Burleson.
That was the old one.
You know, Nick, one thing I would really like for you to do that I think would grow your church another 13% right now is if you were to put a tattoo on the top of your head. I think something, I'm not sure what, but like the peace symbol or something like that. I think it would go over big.
It might go over big with the church. It would not go over big at home.
Hey, guys, we're going to pray for you. Thanks for coming. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for every young pastor and church planter and faith leader that's been a part of this today. I know, God, there's a lot of heaviness and there's fear and anxiety and burden and faith and love all mixed up together. Here's what we pray, God. We want faith and love to win out. Give us courage, wisdom, stamina, endurance, and insight. Thank you, God, for letting us be alive during this period to be a part of a historic time. May we bring honor and glory to you right now. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Nick. Go get them.
Thanks, Bob.